Hey, wonderful people, welcome to my channel. Continuing from the last one, where we talked about how to make out what the wife thinks of the husband in the marriage from the husband's Navamsha chart. Like I promised, let's continue Navamsha studies number 5, but this one with an actual case study. Now, whether this is the chart of an actual man or imaginary, I'll leave it to you, okay? These kinds of things I don't want to get into because we are here to study stuff. So let's begin. Also, I want you to keep in mind that this particular analysis that we are doing of a Navamsha chart of a man who is married does not count nakshatras, does not count the Mahadasha they are in, does not count many other factors. Okay, this is just at the rudimentary level of analysis. I just want to give you a snapshot first to begin with, which will sort of give you a beginning point. If I combine too many things, it's like throwing too many ingredients on the plate to cook with. You're confused, you don't know where to start, what dish to make. There's just too many ingredients. It's like telling you have the whole kitchen, do whatever you want. Well, where should I start? What should I begin? Astrology is something similar, especially Vedic astrology. There's too much of stuff in it, too many ingredients to deal with. So we just simplify it for the sake of analysis so that you get a sort of appreciation of what we are looking for. Appreciation for whether this kind of thing will work or not. Whether you can look at your husband's Navamsha if you're a married woman, or whether you're a man and you can look at your wife's Navamsha and begin to sort of unpack the story a bit. There's always stories and layers which you didn't know existed before. We are here to learn, we are here to understand. Not for the sake of this or that, not for the sake of using. Everything is not about use. In this life, everything is far more bigger than just a human limited concept of use, misuse, abuse, and so on. That's just nonsense, okay? Come on, let's get into the studies. Let's start with the husband's Navamsha chart and how the wife is and sees her marriage with this guy. Okay, let's begin. Right, so there we begin. Now we see Navamsha studies number 5. Husband. This is the husband's Navamsha chart. He's a Virgo ascendant in the Navamsha. I'm ignoring the natal chart here. We're seeing only the Navamsha in the series. And so we begin, if you've seen the previous video, if not look at it, we begin with the 7th house as the first house and we start going counterclockwise through each of the houses and examine how the wife is, how she sees her husband's personality, how different areas of her life relationships are, how she perceives things, what's her sexual desire factor, what's her emotional factor, whether she feels peace at home, how she connects with her in-laws, all of these kinds of things we have to see. Yeah. So the planetary arrangement is there. We are ignoring all the outer planets. We are considering 7 only, right? The basic ones: Jupiter, Sun, Saturn, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Venus, and Rahu and Ketu, right? We are considering this. So let's proceed. So the 7th house in Navamsha, 7th house from the perspective that it's his husband's chart, but which is the first house for the lady. So we are examining from the lady's perspective again. This is a man's Navamsha chart. This is the way the wife is going to work and how she sees the marriage from her perspective. Very clear on that. So first house is desire of the spouse, what she desires from the marriage, individuality and unique qualities of the spouse personality traits, this we covered in the previous, right? Strengths and weaknesses, overall nature, physical appearance, attractiveness, the magnetism. We all have a magnetic quality to us as human beings. What is that? What's the sort of benchmark? Okay. Overall physical features, magnetism that can be expected in the spouse. Now, in the first house, we have for her Ketu, south node of the moon, and Jupiter, as I've indicated here. And what does it provide? First of all, Ketu and Jupiter looks at the 5th aspect as well. So I'm combining, I've not shown it here. In the further slides, I have shown it in this video. So excuse that. So Jupiter looks at even number 9 and number 5. Looking at her perspective, this is 5 and that is 9. Okay. So Jupiter and Ketu, Rahu Ketu have the 5th and the 9th aspect. So all are combined, I have put the summary over here. What's the summary? How the wife is first. She has a mysterious air about her. Ketu provides that. Introverted. Ketu provides that. Seemingly secretive. Seemingly is the question. Lots of people with Ketu in the ascendant are misinterpreted as hiding things. May not necessarily be the case. They may just be introverted, like thinking a lot. Seemingly secretive. Attractive physical appearance. Ketu and Jupiter combined gives that a kind of mysterious appearance, like a Scorpio magnetism, so to speak. Knowledge and wisdom. Okay, they have knowledge of wisdom because Jupiter is present there. Even Ketu is a moksha karaka. Seeking more of it externally and strong inclination to learn and grow with that. This is her nature. Okay. Mercury in the 9th position there from the Jupiter suggests she may continuously learn through life. This I know for a fact. Very smart and intellectual nature. Jupiter looking at Mercury gives a person an ability to, especially Mercury in the 9th house, will give them a lot of desire to study post-graduation, PhD, further studies, real further studies in college and that kind of thing. Okay, past life connect to spirituality. Why Jupiter and Ketu are combined in the 1st house? This is a strong indicator of wisdom this lady has from past life. She will have kids but strangely be detached from them. Why is that? Because Jupiter is combined with Ketu. Jupiter looks at the 5th house, will provide her children. She has 2 lovely children. But she is strangely detached because Ketu detaches them. Ketu detaches if it's sitting in the ascendant from aspects of the 5th house and aspects of the 9th house as well. Okay. So she will have kids but she will be strangely detached. Like, I don't really emotionally attach to the kids, but I will provide them wisdom. I will provide them good knowledge. I will give them, good social behavior, good qualities. I will share all this wisdom with them. Not necessarily emotionally attached. That's the way Jupiter Ketu will behave with the children, because we are talking about the marriage aspects. Okay, that's what it does in the 1st house. Now let's look at the 2nd house. Right, what happens in the 2nd house? The 2nd house has got Sun and Saturn combined in it, which is the 8th house for the man, but 2nd house looking at from the wife's perspective, which is the 8th house in Navamsha for the man. This depicts financial stability. For her, financial stability means, is she earning money? Is she a professional? Does she go to work like a traditional work, business, whatever? So finances earned by the self are the 2nd house, right? And also family, birth family. Also spouse after marriage, voice and speech or verbal things by the spouse. If you want to know the quality of the speech of your spouse, you need to look at the 2nd place. For this guy over here, Mr. Ascendant, Mr. Husband, it will be this house. How this house is, the quality, basically. You got to look at that. And for her, it will be the 8th house because that's her 2nd house. Family, inheritance and potential influence on the spouse's family. Why? Because 8th house looks at the spouse's family house in the 2nd. That is this chap's 2nd house. Yeah. And shared values and beliefs. If you're living as a family, you kind of tend to have some shared beliefs. Yes. That's what it shows. In her case, because Sun and Saturn are sitting in, remember we are not looking at nakshatras here. We are not looking at any other stuff. Just basic planetary position, and that itself gives so many stories. Sun and Saturn are conjunct in the 2nd house for her. So she will be dominating, harsh, frugal in speech. Dominating, why? Sun is present. Harsh and frugal, why? Saturn is present. Does not get along with her spouse, with her younger siblings. Okay? Because 2nd house, she does not get along with them. Suppressed nature. Dominating towards her in-laws. Okay, because Sun looks at the family of the spouse here. So it can be dominating. Sun is everything but domination, right? Wants to be a leader. Dominating towards her in-laws. Late wealth and recognition at work, because Saturn is present in the house of work. Will work for a living. Saturn is present, it will make you work, full stop. Saturn will make a person work. Relatively stable married life, because it looks at the spouse's 2nd house. Saturn, wherever it sits, it creates stability. It creates slowness of time. That's what stability in this context means. Everything will be subject to change anyway. Why do we call Saturn a slow planet? Because it tends to sit on it like a fat man sitting in a place. It sits and suppresses time of that house. So things get delayed. Things get delayed means things take a lot of time to happen wherever Saturn is or looks at. Now let's look at the third house. Now we come to the third house. What is happening in the third house? In the third house, there is no planet, and I wanted to keep this as a general rule. Whenever you don't see any planets, you see the dispositor of that planet, okay, in this case being Venus because it is Taurus, and you also see if some other planets are looking at the house, okay, if there are some aspects of the other planets. From now on, we'll start doing that. So, what is the third house or the ninth house for this chap, for her? It means siblings, extended family of spouse, shows father-in-law, cousins-in-law, siblings-in-law, interactions with them, teamwork. We saw all of this in the previous ones, right? Keep this box, this white box in mind when you're doing this. Compare it to the planetary aspects and you'll get the full meaning. That's simple. You can revisit this video any number of times. How does it get better than that? Right. So what does it provide her? First of all, Rahu, from looking at from her ascendant, Rahu is in the 7th house. So that aspect of Rahu falls on the 3rd house. Also, Mercury is sitting in the 9th house for her. For her, it's 9th house. For this chap, it is 3rd house. So looking at it from her perspective, Mercury from the 9th house also looks at the 3rd house. So what does this provide her? This is my analysis of it. May have younger siblings and cousins. Will go for short travels abroad. Spouse may be resident abroad and she may go time and time again to visit the spouse. Tendency to have attraction to men abroad. Men of foreign lands. Mercury is sitting in a foreign land place and Rahu is looking at that particular thing, right? Into this aspect. So it may be possible. Short flings and affairs. Why? Because Rahu is looking at this 3rd house of hers. 3rd house is the beginning of sexual desire, like having short-term affairs. Yeah. She may have short flings and affairs. Shrewd and cunning in the matters relating to peers at work. Competitive and clever. Why? Because Mercury is there. Mercury gives the shrewdness. Rahu amplifies it. Okay. And Venus is sitting here also. Right? Venus is the dispositor. So it may influence this heavily for her. Competitive and clever brings the same quality with in-laws. Remember, this is a place for in-laws. Look at the white box. As from a marriage perspective, 3rd place also stands for in-laws because they become your new peer group. Okay? May love software and computers. Rahu combined with Mercury will give a software engineer. Think about that. May love software, computers, IT and develop skills in that. She is. Now let's look at this guy, the 4th house. Okay. So what's happening in the 4th house? Well, 4th house is here, which is highlighted. It's got moon in it, right? 4th house for her, 10th house for Mr. Husband. Now, 10th house of Navamsha, spouse's domestic peace of marriage. Is she peaceful in the house? Yes. Moon is sitting here, so definitely. But Saturn is sitting here in the 2nd house. So 3rd aspect from Saturn looks at this. She feels kind of stifled at home. She feels emotionally stifled. She's like, my emotions are not being able to be expressed in this house. Also, but she does feel a sense of peace. Moon in her 4th house is good for her. Everybody wants moon in 4th house. Everybody wants emotional comfort, nurturing, the tenderness in the home front. That's what home is. Home is where the heart is, right? Also, another aspect we see, mutual one, is Venus sitting in her 10th place, right? Looking at it from her side, it's in the 10th house for her. So what does this bring us along with these elements in this white box? Emotional connect with mother-in-law. Conflicting emotions at home. Moon in the house of Mercury. Moon is sitting in Gemini. Moon and Gemini don't get along. You can see the dispositors in my previous videos. So these two don't get along. Moon and Mercury are enemies. So if Moon sits in the house of Mercury, it feels stifled already. Plus, like Saturn, like we saw in the previous slide, is sitting in the 3rd. So 3rd place from Saturn is always an effort in any area of life, in any divisional chart, in natal chart, etc. So she will feel a little bit stifled emotionally at home. She will have land and real estate in the homeland. Saturn provides it because Saturn also looks at it. Moon also in the fourth house provides land and real estate in the homeland. Emotional intimacy at home is very important for her. More emotionally secure in homeland than abroad. Moon sitting in the fourth house. Will desire to decorate her home with lots of artwork, paintings. Why? Venus is looking at her, the home front. So Venus will want to bring all the nice paintings, artwork, decorative pieces, plants, paintings, and a woman is the owner of the house. She is the lord of the nest. So she will want to bring and put all lovely things and decorate her house. Okay? That's one of the part of her nature. Now let's see the fifth house. So what do we have in the fifth house? In the fifth house, what's happening? Fifth house is the house of love, education, romance, passion in case of marriage. The passion, romance and the enjoyment of opposite sex in a marriage, in terms of emotional bonding, in terms of intimacy, is seen from the fifth house for her, okay, which is 11th house for this Mr. Husband. Level of romance, passion, enjoyment experienced by the spouse. So what's happening in her case? Ketu and Jupiter are looking at it, which is not really good. It provides like a mixed bag of things. Let's see what it provides for her. This lovely lady. Detachment from love and romantic aspects from her side. This is from her side towards him. Be very careful with which side you interpret it. Astrology is not a single way of looking at things. There are always two sides to a coin in astrology. We are just seeing the husband's Navamsha. We'll do the wife's Navamsha next and then see what happens in her story. Okay? It's always a different perspective, looking at a different ascendant, looking at a different Navamsha. So from her side, Ketu provides a detachment of love and romantic aspects. She will conceive kids because Jupiter is looking at the fifth house, which is his own house, so he will give her kids, and she does. But emotionally unavailable for them. Ketu provides the detachment. She thinks of kids as having just, I need to give them wisdom, I need to give them sense of duty, I need to give them education, provide for them. It's like a duty thing for her children, not emotional connection as a mother. Will teach them wisely, educate them, will have very liberal views on religion. Why? Ketu is liberalist. Okay? Ketu looks at the world view, Ketu looks at the larger picture. Rahu is the one who gets narrow-minded. Okay? Liberal views on religion, very focused on education. Marriage is an act of duty. Ketu and Jupiter combined will give this. If it looks at the house of romance, it becomes a duty. Everything is a duty. Responsibility for her, not enjoyment as such. It takes away the enjoyment part of it. Loves intellectual discussions with the spouse. If Mr. Spouse here understands that, they can have good intellectual discussions between them. That could be sparking a kind of bond, we might say. Not necessarily romance, but a bond. But wants to dominate that conversation like a teacher to the student. Jupiter is arrogant in this way that even if he's a teacher or a professor, he always wants to get the better of the student. So she treats her husband like a student, like a child. Like, I know better than you, you need to learn from me. That kind of an approach doesn't make for good relationship, does it? Now let's see what's happening in the sixth house for her. So in the sixth house, we have nothing there. But where is the Lord of the sixth house? Is sitting in the second house, as I have highlighted over here. What does the sixth house stand for? Potential obstacles, disagreements, conflict, fights within the marriage, power struggles. Who is the superior boss here? In the house, who is the boss? Husband or the wife, right? Always a power struggle there. This house will show that from her perspective. Now, her dispositor is sitting in the second house of family. She wants to be the boss. She will be dominating everything in the household. She wants to dominate. And Sun is exalted for her because it is sitting in the sign of Aries. So she will dominate. Dominance within partnership, family matters because it's sitting in the second house. Always needing to win an argument or disagreements. You see this kind of people? I have to win this argument. I'll not give in. I don't care how wise you are or how true your words are. I want to be the one who says the last word. Probably due to father issues in her birth family. Why? Because father is combined with Saturn. Might have had a very strict upbringing with father, not very close to father, thinks of father as a disciplinarian. So now she comes to marriage and now she wants to dominate. She says, now here, this is my area. I want to dominate at all costs. These kind of things play out with us psychologically, yes. She will want leadership that dominates at work because 6th house is also the place of daily routines. In her work, she will dominate. Okay? Will expose and defeat all her enemies and competition at workplace because the dispositor sun is doing very well. Right? And it is sitting in the 2nd house. So defeating enemies, and because of defeating enemies, there will be a rise in her profession. Could be another interpretation. Okay? Now let's see the 1st house, the Bhavat Bhavam house. Okay, this is important. Now how she sees her husband. Let's see. Now we come to Mr. Husband, and we got a whole lot of arrows, as you can see, because this house is being aspected by a number of things. First of all, Mars is aspected by Ketu. Mars is looking at Ketu over here. Mars is looking in the 4th aspect at Venus. Mars is looking at the 8th aspect on the 2nd house. Rahu, on the other hand, 5th and 9th aspect is looking at her 3rd house and her 9th house. Oh my goodness. And Jupiter is looking at the 1st house. There's so much going on with this husband of hers and all the aspects that is marked here. I had to summarize in a paragraph. Seriously, which has been quite some time. So what is 7th house for her? Looking at it. Now she looks at the husband. How your spouse sees you. Your personality traits, your behavior, your overall disposition, desire of the spouse from marriage from her perspective, how she is looking at her husband. This is her husband. Okay? So this is all Bhavat Bhavam aspects is also there. Past life connection. Let's see how all of this white box plays out for our lady beautiful over here. Your spouse, how does she see you in marriage? She sees as aggressive, dominating. Mars and Rahu combined will give the most dominating spouse. She sees like that. She is wise, she is detached, but she sees her husband as a combination of Mars and Rahu. That's very aggressive, dominating, obsessive, compulsive. Mr. Rahu's characteristic. Thinks she knows it all and overtly attached to her siblings. She is obsessive compulsive because she is looking at these aspects of 9th and 3rd, right? Attached to her siblings, her skills, her hobbies, one who is very keen on getting higher degrees. Why Rahu is looking at that. Okay? Wanting to do something in the area of IT, software industry, wanting to live abroad, wanting to live in tasteful, decorative, beautiful houses because Mars is looking at Venus, right? From the husband's point of view also, they would want a large big house. And so does the wife look at that. Okay, wife is looking at husband, looking at all of this. That's how she perceives it. Passionate, a very keen interest in uncovering hidden secrets because this Mars is looking at her 2nd house. Okay, so Mr. Husband over here is always suspecting. I know she's doing something. I know she's having an affair. I know this. I know that. I need to investigate. Always wanting to look at secrets of Mr. Husband. I know this to be a fact. In fact, that's how I got the charts. Passionate about, very keen interest in uncovering hidden secrets of the spouse and spouse's family. He is looking at her family. Spouse has high sex drive. Mars and Rahu combined. Wants sex all the time. Passionate and needing it a lot. Mars and Rahu will give that very strong sexual drive, libido, whatever you want to call it. Potential for a lot of secret affairs on the side for him. That's the way she is looking at. Spouse may be an enemy or a jilted lover from past life. Come to sort out karma this time around. Why do I say that? The combination of Mars and Rahu might be a jilted lover. A lover whom you abandoned in the past. Now you have come to work it out with the same soul as your husband in this lifetime. That's her karma. Okay. Now let's see that particular house, which is the 8th house. Now in the 8th house, there's not much going on. There are two aspects from Sun and Saturn. 8th house is the second house of Navamsha, which is for longevity transformations. That's 8th house for her. Okay, just as a reminder. For her, that is 8th house. For him, this is second house. So what does this provide her? 8th house is secrets, joint assets after marriage, sexual life after marriage, change and transformation, stability of the marriage, and so on. All these aspects. Marital bond. What is the psychological emotional bond that a husband and wife have? That is the net fruit of a marriage, which is the 8th house, which is very critical. So the dispositor, in this case it's a sign of Libra, is sitting in the 10th house. From her perspective, it's 10th house. And Sun and Saturn look at this house also, her 8th house. So Saturn looking at that provides a stable marriage. Despite anything that might go on, despite she might be having affairs, husband might be having affairs on the side, but they'll still stay married because of Saturn looking at that house. And Saturn, by the way, is sitting in the Mr. Husband's 8th house also. So look at how this works out. Both ways it works out. Even that same Saturn looks at her 8th house and provides that stability. Saturn looking at this house. Although the drive to dominate and uncover family secrets, joint assets is largely controlling her. Sun is shining on that 8th house. When Sun starts shining on some house, it will want to expose everything in that house. It shines. Just think of the sun. Whenever sun is in the sky, like how it is now, it shines on everything. It removes every trace of darkness in that particular area of the earth, right? It's just light, blazing white light. So sun stands for that. It illuminates whatever it touches. Period. Sun is just illumination. It doesn't care what it shines its light on. It may be in the most creepy crawly of creatures. It may be in the most brightest of creatures. It shines light on everything. Okay? So now it is shining light on the 8th house. So it will want to have an interest in all the joint assets. And need to dominate is a strong thing about Sun. Sexual activity becomes restricted. Saturn looking at the house of sex will make it restricted. Marital bond is a challenge as urge to dominate is very strong. Think about the psychological aspects of what I just said. Lack of vulnerability. If you are trying to dominate your marriage, Mr. Husband or Mr. Wife or whoever it is that is listening to this, you will not have vulnerability. If you don't have vulnerability, you don't have intimacy. If you don't have real intimacy and emotional bond, I don't care how many times you mash your body parts, you're not going to have intimacy. I'm sorry, that's the way it works, right? Lack of vulnerability, this is where it comes from. Change of her profession will bring changes to the relationship dynamic within the marriage. This is good news. Why? Venus is in the house of career for her, 10th place. And Venus is the dispositor of this 8th house. Whenever she changes profession, there might be a window depending upon what planets are transiting her chart. And we have to see her chart for this. That window of time may be a transformational time for better in marriage for her. Imagine this. If she changes a profession, things might turn out better in her marriage. So the relationship dynamic between husband and wife might change for the better because Venus is the Karaka of Navamsha. Venus is a planet to be looked at always carefully in every Navamsha chart. Okay, remember this. Will definitely become interested in occult sciences later on because Sun and Saturn both are looking at the 8th house. They will become interested in occult at some point in life. Okay, because there is Ketu and Jupiter also in the ascendant for her later in life, whenever that happens. Now let's look at the 9th house. So what's happening in the 9th house? In the 9th house, we are getting aspected by Ketu and Jupiter, as well as the dispositor of this house, which is ruled by Scorpio, the sign of Scorpio, and Mercury is sitting there, and Scorpio ruler is sitting in the house of spouse. So what does the ninth house represent? Luck after marriage, long-term travel, higher learning, worldview with the spouse, long distance travel with the spouse, foreign connections, journeys by spouse, intellectual compatibility between husband and wife. Okay, so what will happen as a result of all of this? She will see spouse as very secretive, Scorpio, sign of Scorpio, and Mercury is buried there. She will see husband as immature. Why? Because Guru or Jupiter is looking at Mercury. Jupiter, whenever it looks at Mercury, this dynamic is a teacher-student. So this person in the ascendant, meaning I am the teacher, looks at the Mercury and says, you are a child, you don't know what you're talking about. You see the dynamic there? So we'll see her husband as immature, someone who needs guidance and wisdom rather than working things out as an equal. She will not perceive her husband as an equal simply because of the single dynamic of Jupiter looking at Mercury directly. She has great interest in intellectual pursuits, higher education, post-graduation. Because Jupiter looks at Mercury, provides good education. She is still studying, by the way. After marriage and 2 kids. So she's very liberal minded because Ketu is there. Long distance travel may happen from time to time. Her communication is sparse, less communication. Ketu will restrict that. Mercury sitting in Scorpio will restrict that. Okay. So she may appear introverted, frugal, appearing introverted, but secretive in truth. In truth, she is very secretive. Scorpio hides stuff. Okay. And her husband is also very secretive because he is looking at the 3rd place. His skill set is pretty secretive. She might be having dualistic opinions. Her ascendant is Pisces. It's a dual sign. 12th house is a dual sign. So she always flipping between, no, but this is also right. No, but this person also right. No, no, no. What about this? Yeah, but what about this? This is a dual sign. Okay, dualistic opinions, changing view about religion. Ketu and Jupiter combined gives this weird combination of I want to be liberal minded, but I also want to be traditional. Jupiter is very traditional, Ketu is very unorthodox. Now you stuck them together in the head, and what happens? They are in a dual sign. It becomes very flippy. Once one opinion about religion, once one another opinion about religion. Religion, why? Because it's looking at the 9th house. It's a house of worldview, philosophy, and religion. Changing views about religion and philosophy, keen interest and constantly exploring that subject through life. This dynamic, this person makes it very, very keen in that area because Jupiter will and Ketu will look at that Mercury and continuously explore. This is a dynamic, very challenging dynamic for maybe the husband. Okay. Now looking at the 10th house from her perspective, whose dispositor, Mr. Jupiter over here. And there's Venus sitting and aspected by Moon. So 10th house from a marriage perspective is not much. It might be her profession. It might be a profession, how she feels about it, right? It might be the more of reputation of the couple, how the public sees the couple overall. Reputation, public image and reputation of the couple. How everybody sees you as a couple, not as individuals. So this combination gives us very good relationship with mother-in-law because Moon looks at this house. Mother and mother-in-law dynamic is very good. She gets along very well with mother. She gets along very well with mother-in-law. They have a very good public image of the marriage, right? Because Venus and Moon are good planets and they are both in good signs here. Professional success is always on her mind. Why? Because Jupiter is there. The dispositor is sitting in the 1st house for her. Dispositor of the 10th house is sitting in the 1st house. So always thinking of I need to succeed in my career. Okay, I need to even teach in my career. Support for profession can improve the dynamic in their marital bond immensely. If Mr. Husband over here takes this one aspect of this wife and says, let me work with this. Let me support her in a profession. Because that's what's important to her. This is the thing people need to understand. You need as husband and wife, you need to do things which the other person likes, not what's in your head or what you think is right. Nothing more to give that kind of a perspective than Vedic astrology. See what I got here in my hands. She is thinking about career. Mr. Husband supports that She will start opening new dimensions in the marriage. New kind of relationship dynamic can develop. A bond can develop in a nice way. Right? Okay. Now let's look at which house is this? 11th house. So what does 11th house mean for us here? It is being aspected by Rahu, and its dispositor is Saturn is sitting in the second house. So 11th house for her is fulfillment of desires. Why do we get married after all? Long-term fulfillment of desires. Long-term meaning, will my children grow up? Will they be good people? How will my in-laws be if they have a number of children, daughter-in-law, son-in-law? Will they do well? Will they have wealth, good health, good wealth? Everybody wants these things. That is shown in the 11th house for her. For her, the 11th house sits in 5th house for him. So it's the same aspect, but let's see what this gets her. She has secret sexual desires of men of foreign origin. Okay, because Rahu is sitting there, okay, and this 11th house is also the house of gains and going into the foreign lands, which is Saturn sitting here. So she might be having this desire for elderly men. Saturn is elderly men of foreign lands. Slow and steady gains in wealth and career, and very few friends in the community. Okay, Saturn suppresses this, very few friends. And social media, although there is desire for popularity and quick money, because Rahu has that desire. Rahu, when it looks at the house of money, she wants money, boss. She wants a lot of money. She's not necessarily a gold digger maybe, but she is secretly desiring that money. But because it's a house of Saturn and Saturn is sitting in the second house, she will have to earn that money. It's not like a lottery ticket for her at least. Okay. Now let us see the 12th house. Okay, so the 12th house is over there, seeing it from her perspective. This is Mr. Husband's 6th house. So it's for spiritual growth, introspection, detachment with spouse, potential for spiritual pursuits, etc. Everything in this box which we discussed in the part 4. Now what is the result of all these arrows going back and front? Okay, the one dispositor is sitting in second house, the Rahu is sitting in the 7th house, looking at the house of gains. It is lots of crisscross going on. Let's just summarize it. Spiritual truths and growths for this soul, this beautiful lady here whom we are discussing, can potentially happen slowly and steadily through her work. She needs to work. Work becomes her worship, karma. Okay, karma yoga. She is more of karma yogi. Slow and steady growth through life. She can even learn that from family, because Saturn teaches that karma. She can learn that from foreign travels and from her married life itself. Her own marriage is her place of worship. If she dedicates herself to it, uses all the wisdom of Ketu, Jupiter, Mercury, everything that she's got, use this good relations, marriage can be good for her also. It's always a choice, my dear people. It's always a choice. Even if you see all the astrology in the world, I've seen people who know astrology 10 times better than me. I'm just a student like you. They still go and mess up everything because they don't choose to see it in a higher way, right? It is a choice. It always is a choice. Okay. Next, let us see the wife's Navamsha chart and how the husband sees the marriage with this same lady. Okay. Next, we'll examine the wife. Meanwhile, take care, be safe.